everyone, to a very special episode here at NotInHallOfFame.com, and I am blessed. I have got with me Ken Crippen of the Football Learning Academy, and I've got Bill Carroll. And if he doesn't know the answer about something with scouting, you've asked the wrong question. Safe to say?
I do what I can. I'm a man of the people.
There you go. Two great football minds, and the reason that I've asked them both to be here today is one of my side projects that I do with Evan Nolan, and Ken's a part of that now too. And Bill, you're going to be, by the way. I'm volunteering you into this. It's the United States Athletic Hall of Fame that you can vote on at www.notinhalloffame.com/USA. Now, there's 18 players who are specifically just in football. There's a 19th technically, not technically, in Jim Thorpe, but we're not going to be discussing him today. I've asked both Ken and Bill. I'm going to give them two names from those who have been nominated, and I should go from the nominating committee. On that committee is our two former Olympic bronze medalists, and in the realm of football, seven-time Pro Bowler and Miami Dolphins Ring of Honor member Richmond Webb. So I think I got some people who know what they're talking about. It's not just me and Evan throwing stuff at a wall. Sometimes we do that just for fun, but that's not what this is. So as I'm going to do that, let's allot maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask the two of you to say who you would pick if you could only vote for one of the two. Now, when you do go to vote, you can vote, you're voting for 25, and the first class will be 25 names. So in theory, you could vote all 18 football players if you really wanted to. You may want to, you may not. I don't know. That's the great thing about this, because it's truly of the people for the people. This is all going to be transparent. So when all the votes are in, you're going to see them top to bottom. Who got what? How's that for an innovative idea for a Hall of Fame? Apparently that doesn't always happen, does it?
Not always.
Not always. Okay, so let's begin. So here are the first two players that I'd like you to, again, pick one. And it doesn't matter, you don't have to necessarily agree with each other, but I'm just going to turn it over to the two of you. So we're going to start off with, we're going to go old school to begin. Sammy Baugh and Red Grange.
Huh. Yeah, you don't mess around. What I love about Sammy Baugh is that he's had seasons where he was the best punter in football, where he might have been the best safety in football, and then for several years he was probably the best quarterback in football. I remember towards the end of his life, he had a sit down where they did about 2 or 3 days, I think, together with each other with Peyton Manning and Sammy Baugh. And Sammy was clearly having fun with Peyton, right? He would say things like, oh, that's right, I keep forgetting you only play, on offense, I can't imagine what I would have done if all I had to do was throw the football. I might have gotten bored, But Sammy was a delight, and helped to develop Art Powell, right? Who is about to finally be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Art Powell had been woefully misused in the first few years of his NFL and CFL careers. The Eagles tried to turn him into from a wide receiver to a defensive back for reasons I will never begin to understand. And then he spent a year with the CFL being misused. And when he gets to the Titans, Sammy Baugh, who nothing else he knows, this is someone we should be throwing the football to, especially throwing it deep to. And suddenly, Art Powell emerges. But I think Sammy Baugh is a person you put in a hall of whatever if you're having a hall of something. What do you say, Ken?
Yeah, I mean, you started with Sammy. I'm going to start with Red Grange, and we'll work the opposite way. I know my University of Illinois bias may be showing with Red Grange, but, obviously one of the greatest college players of all time. Some people, credit him with, saving the NFL. It was struggling during the mid-20s there. But, the counter argument to that is, well, he also started a rival league that almost bankrupted the NFL. So Red Grange, obviously great athlete. But, I can't not go with Sammy Baugh. I mean, as Bill had mentioned, great all-around football player, excellent passer. He basically took the T formation to another level. He had 4 passing titles, 2 passing touchdown titles, 8-time completion percentage leader. So obviously he could throw the ball. But then Bill also talked about his punting, 5-time punting average leader. And he excelled at defensive back. He was an NFL interception leader in 1943. To me, how can you not have Sammy Baugh in a Hall of Fame?
Right. Yeah, and it hurts. I have a master's degree from University of Illinois, so I also am very familiar. I was a graduate assistant, in fact. Shout out to Coach Lou Tepper, who I had the great pleasure of working for back in the day. And they still have, a large number of Harold Red Grange's, everything's down there in the facility. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 42 for some crazy number of games he played in that crazy barnstorming year where they were trying to, essentially, he said save the league. I think it was 42, some crazy number, like a number that doesn't seem right when you read it.
Yeah, you look at it 3 or 4 times to see if it's correct, and yeah, it is.
Some number that just didn't make sense to me. Every time I look at it, like, that can't be right. He must have been playing, sometimes probably more than one game a week, I'm guessing.
I think it sometimes during those types of barnstorming tours, they'd play a couple of games in a day.
That's insanity. But yes, I mean, Harold Red Grange is one of the most important players in the history of the game. But if we're just taking it on the merits of what they could do on the field, there's not many players that would take over Sammy Baugh for the ability to just all the different things he could do at that level.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Sammy Baugh's the choice between those two. No slight against Red Grange, but Sammy Baugh did it all, and yeah, he definitely deserves the nod on this one.
Okay, that went pretty easy. Let's see how this one goes. Remember, this one encompasses college too. So we have somebody who probably wouldn't be here if it's just based on his pro, but he is, and that was what the electorate sort of came up with as a nominee. We've got Bo Jackson versus Deion Sanders.
Oh.
I can see why I did that.
Well, even if you encapsulate college too, I mean, Deion is one of those players that you tell your grandchildren about. I mean, Bo was. God, they were both so good, and so good, and so in ways that are memorable, right? They weren't just great players; they were great players that burn their way into your memory. I think the first time I noticed Deion was about 6 games into his playing career at Florida State. And he was not a full-time player on defense, but he was maybe the best kickoff punt returner I'd seen since, I don't know, Johnny Rodgers. I mean, he was ludicrously good. He changed the way people talk about Devin Hester. If Deion had been a full-time punt and kickoff returner, no offense to Devin Hester, but he would be the second best kickoff and punt returner in the history of the game. Deion was deadly eventually they stopped letting him do it. Well, except in certain situations, like when they had to have it, they'd put him back out there. But for a year and a half, he was just so electric as a returner. And then he's on the Mount Rushmore of corners, both college and pro. And he played a little bit of offense. I mean, I don't take that much into account. Like, it was a sort of a gimmicky kind of thing. And if he'd started it earlier in his career, he probably could have been a pretty good wide receiver. He played both ways a little bit in high school. But everyone who watched him do both in high school said, oh, he's a defensive back, So there was no real debate about that. Oh yeah, he's a decent receiver, but he'll be one of the great corners ever. And I mean, people said that about him at 16 and they were right. Bo Jackson's like Paul Bunyan, right? He's almost mythological. And obviously, as you said, his pro career was cut disastrously, painfully short, both in baseball and football. But people still to this day talk about Vincent Bo Hogg, later shortened to Bo Jackson, in terms of what he could do on a baseball diamond and, of course, on a football field. I mean, people point to like dents in the scoreboard to say, oh yeah, Bo Jackson hit a ball 560 feet or something crazy. But it's one of those things we have to choose, right? I assume we have to choose. No ties allowed. Well, then if it's one of those things we have to choose, no ties allowed. Once again, I'm forced to go with the guy who was better longer. Deion was certainly in discussions for the best ever at his position, both in college and the pros. Bo, and I saw a lot of really good running backs, but I mean, I can't put Bo in college above what I saw Barry Sanders do. I can't put Bo above what I saw Marcus Allen do. I'm not sure. I mean, he, as great as he was, I don't know if I don't know. I can't put him above Herschel Walker. He's in the top 10 of guys that I was lucky enough to see at the right, maybe even top 8, but he's not number 1. He's not number 2. He's not number 3. Deion may be number 1. He's certainly no lower than number 2 of all the corners I was blessed to see play in college. And he's in the top 3 of all the pro corners I've ever seen. So with that having been, I don't know how I can go against Deion. As much as I'd love to say Bo, I just can't go against Deion Sanders.
Yeah, I have to agree with Bill on this one, that if you try to evaluate Bo Jackson, you have to look at potential, and we can't vote on potential. We have to vote on what they actually did. And to me, if Bo Jackson had that extended career, then the discussion's going to be different. But you really have to go with Deion at this point, especially when you combine college and pro and everything that he did. Deion Sanders has got to get the vote on this one. I mean, you look at all the Pro Bowls, the all-decade teams, the 100th anniversary team, all that kind of stuff.
Every team there is, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. And like Bill said, one of the best defensive backs in history, whether you put him 1 or 1A or 2, I mean, still out of the 23,000 some odd players to be 1A or 2, I'd say is pretty good. So to me, it has to be Deion, because you can't vote based off of potential of what Bo could have done.
Even throwing baseball, he had more sustained success as a baseball player than Bo. I mean, it's not a fair comparison, as Ken just pointed out, because unfortunately we didn't get to see what Bo might have been, but we don't have to wonder what Deion might have been. We saw what Deion was.
Yeah, and even if you bring in the baseball stuff too, I mean, since we're looking at a totality of a Hall of Fame, not just a football Hall of Fame, right. Yeah, you can definitely bring that into the discussion. But even when you add in the baseball career of Bo Jackson, it's still the totality of their careers. Deion has to take it in this one.
Yep, agreed. Okay. Sorry, Kirk, it hasn't been very controversial or exciting yet.
It's been informative. I wasn't necessarily going for controversy. If I was going to do that, there are some people I could have brought on for that.
Good point.
Yes. All right, so we got another pair of quarterbacks. We're going to go with Johnny Unitas versus Otto Graham.
Ooh, can now get spicy.
This one could get ugly, yeah.
This one could. Oh, this is tough. Oh, this is horrible. So tough. Oh, this is hard. This is very hard for me.
You want to take a minute and I'll start on this one?
Please do start. Please
all right. Start. I mean, you're talking 1 and 1A of quarterbacks of all time. I mean, yeah, when Brady starts coming into the conversation, then that may change things a little bit. But to me, Johnny Unitas, field general. I mean, you look at him and the way that he was able to take command of that field was unbelievable. But I'm still going to have to go Otto Graham on this one. I mean, when you look at the fact that he played 10 years, went to 10 straight championship games, winning 7 of them. You compare that to Brady, who, everybody nowadays with recency bias is saying the greatest quarterback of all time. It took Brady twice as long to get the same number of championships as Otto Graham. You look at the winning percentage, Otto Graham. You look at the fact that, he also had that undefeated season. I mean, Tom Brady had an undefeated season until he got to the Super Bowl, but then he lost. Well, you don't have that with Otto Graham. He had the undefeated season and won the championship. And to think about it too, he went 29 straight games without a defeat. Now think about that. You lose 1 game in a season, go the rest of the season undefeated, win a championship, go the entire next season undefeated and win a championship, and then go into the following season, only lose 1 game and win a championship. You lost 3 games three games within the AAFC. You've got 4 championships. He won more championships than he lost games.
All right.
How can you not say that Otto Graham is number 1?
So Ken made a bunch of amazing points. And once again, since we're talking sports, also won a ring in basketball, right? Mm-hmm. So as much as it pains me, because my father was a huge Colts fan. I wanted to disagree, and I thought about disagreeing, but I really can't. I was almost going to do it just to say, at least we probably disagreed. But I just want to say this about Johnny Unitas. What he did was he just reset the bar, right? If you look at everybody who precedes Johnny Unitas, it's like watching the home run hitters prior to Babe Ruth, right? Wow, 22 home runs. Wow, what a season, right? And then you look and see what Johnny Unitas goes out and does. And he changes everyone's idea of what the passing game can be. He took the passing game that, we saw Sammy Baugh and Sid Luckman establish, and I guess Frankie Albert to a slightly lesser extent. And it stayed there, basically, where those guys had left it until Unitas comes along, who's driving a bread truck for a year, right? Gets cut by the Steelers. I mean, think about that. People talk about, the story of Kurt Warner. I mean, for a year, Johnny Unitas is playing semi-pro ball and driving a bread truck. How crazy is that? And then luckily, a team realizes they've got a couple of injuries at the quarterback position. Somebody remembers him from having played, with him and says, hey, why don't we take a look at this Unitas guy? Yeah, what the heck? God, what a career. I wanted to disagree. I really did, because of just when it was so hard to play quarterback, the things he did, right? The touchdown streak, resetting the whole idea of completion percentage, where people would get super excited about 50%. And then, he's pushing it towards 60. But I can't go against what Kid said, partially because of what was just established. If the game at some point is about winning in championships, nobody had more sustained success in their entire career than automatic Otto Graham. And then, I think he had an all-service championship at Great Lakes. If we're we kind of laugh at that, but this is when everybody was in the military practically. He's playing against a bunch of really good players at the time because of the draft, not football draft, but the military draft. I mean, a whole generation of players, Van Brocklin, name it, are all playing, service ball. And I think his service team won the all service championship too. He didn't lose much, at any level. Great basketball player, pretty darn good baseball player, but obviously, I think, as you said, recently biased. I wish people would remember what a great quarterback he was, because extremely accurate, mobile, tough. There wasn't anything he couldn't do, and absorbed what was probably the most complex offense in all of football, and apparently did it, I don't want to say effortlessly, but quickly. He did it really, really quickly, and, was able to run plays without, as much as Paul Brown was a total control freak, Graham didn't need to be controlled. He had complete control over the offense. So yeah, sorry, Kirk, still agree.
No, sorry needed. I love it. All right, well, let's see what happens here. We're going to the defensive side of the ball. Joe Green, Lawrence Taylor.
Oh. Huh. Okay, so we were talking about admitting our biases, so I'll start with admitting my bias. I am from Norfolk, Virginia Beach. I had two cousins, shout out to Tori and Tomas Johnson, who were teammates of Lawrence Taylor at Lafayette High School, both basketball and football. So the first time I saw Lawrence Taylor, I think he was about 16 years old. And even then, it was clear he was different. And he'd been a basketball player, but he hadn't played organized football at all till his junior year of high school. He was a basketball player. And he messed around with football, but didn't take it seriously. And then he goes from being a guy that thought himself as a basketball player to being one of the greatest football players anyone's ever seen. And then Joe Green. Obviously, he's the linchpin of one of the great defenses of all time. And because of the position he played, the numbers, though they are impressive, don't really reflect his impact. The Steelers don't win one, let alone four titles without Joe Green. Oh, this is hard. One guy completely changed football, right? He changed blocking schemes. People changed how quickly the ball came out. They changed everything about what they did on offense to try to account. Joe Gibbs went two tight ends, right? At least in part, if not entirely, because of I have to have one more blocker, right? I'll sacrifice to make him go a little bit farther. I can bring this guy out and wham block if I have to, but I got to have one more big body on my line. It's driving me crazy, and I'm a Steelers fan, but I'm going to have to go Lawrence Taylor, and for two reasons. As great as Joe Green is so great, because of where he was on the field, it was possible to kind of avoid him if you really had to, if you really wanted to. And obviously you have LT, who's playing, linebacker, technically speaking, linebacker. He's, a stand-up D end, whatever you can call it. But he wouldn't let you avoid him, right? He would find ways to make plays. You would run a play, completely this side. He would run down from behind, right? I mean, he was. You throw the ball, you throw a screen pass, and he would, snag it and take off with it. I mean, he was just. If he'd been more disciplined, God knows what he would have done. But he just made such an impact in every way that football was played on offense, even beyond what Joe Green did. He changed the game more. So as much as that hurts, it does hurt. I'm going to go Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to echo a lot of the stuff that Bill had said here. I mean, there's absolutely no disrespect at all to Joe Green, one of the best defensive tackles that you're going to see out there. Absolutely dominant. And he was one of the, like Bill said, one of the reasons why they won 4 Super Bowls. But, and I really hate using this term because it's so overused right now, but Lawrence Taylor did change the game. And to have somebody have that big of an impact and change the way offenses had to play and how they had to position people, what people they had to put out there to try to game plan against him, you've got to take Lawrence Taylor. I mean, some people are going to say that, Robert Brazile was LT before LT. I get it, but LT took it to a different level and took it beyond what Robert Brazile had done. So for somebody that truly did change the game like LT did, I would have to pick him over Green. But, again, no disrespect at all to Green. I mean, he was absolutely dominant at his position.
Right. I mean, I wish, once again, more young people had seen Joe Green in his prime, because I heard people say, the greatest, defensive lineman of all time is Justin James Watt. And he was incredible for about a 4 or 5 year span. But one is he was helped by the fact that they throw the ball so much more. So you got to rush the passer way more than Joe Green did. Joe Green, it was probably, the game was 62-ish% run in those days, so he didn't rack up as many sacks. But my God, if they threw the ball like that with Joe Green, because no amount of double teams would have stopped Joe Green from getting to quarterbacks. But because you ran at him more, and you were able, he was having to hold his place, hold his point. He was still making a lot of tackles, but he wasn't getting to the quarterbacks the same level. I just wish more young people had seen just what a ridiculous force of nature he was. But Lawrence Taylor will go down, I mean, on the defensive, quote unquote, Mount Rushmore. Speaking of overused terms, Ken, Mount Rushmore. But you can't keep Dion off the Mount Rushmore of defense. You can't keep Lawrence Taylor off the Mount Rushmore of defense. There's a discussion to be had about defensive tackle. Now, obviously, we talked about young people. Young people will put Aaron Donald up there probably. Once again, a young man with ties to Pittsburgh. And then some older people will point to Merlin Olsen, right? It depends on how old you are when these guys imprinted on you. My dad thought the world of Alex Karras, but there's no real discussion to be had about pass rushers. I mean, you could try having one, but people who know what they're talking about say Lawrence Taylor, but everybody else is fighting for second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Let's see if we have any disagreement here. I doubt it, but we'll find out. We're going to the running backs. Jim Brown versus Emmitt Smith.
Okay. Once again, my biases are going to have to be addressed. I never got to see the man play live, but I was introduced to him as a small child. My father was, once again, a huge fan of the Colts, but he made an exception sort of for Jim Brown. He didn't like the Browns, but he loved Jim Brown. And we talk about changing the game. Teams would put everybody within 4 yards of the line of scrimmage. And people forget, Jim Brown wasn't a running back. He was a fullback. He was a fullback. He was there. There wasn't really a person leading him, right? He didn't. I mean, he's not another running back leading him into the line. He was his own blocking back, right? He was it BYOB, be your own blocker? I mean, he was his own blocking back. He was the guy who was leading himself through the whole. And no offense to Leroy Kelly or Bobby Mitchell, those weren't the kind of guys that were out there flat backing people. They weren't out there, nailing linebackers. They were sort of drawing the attention of the defense by, sometimes taking off with a fake, or to sort of take your eyes this way. Because Bobby Mitchell, no offense, was about 186 pounds soaking wet. So he wasn't the guy that was going out. He gave good effort, but he wasn't about to take on Sam Huff in the hole. You don't want that. I mean, Sam wants that, but Bobby doesn't want that. And Paul Brown's too smart a man to do that. So Jim Brown did most of his damage, either in that split where they're both backs are even, or when he's, right here, right, in front of so that he's sort of not even building up ahead of steam. Like we think about the great running backs, O.J. Simpson, Barry Sanders. These guys are 9-7 yards deep. Jim's 3.5. Probably yards deep. So he's generating all that power, all that force. It's like Bruce Lee, right? The 6-inch punch with 2 steps. And then boom, he's hitting Sam Huff and running over him. He's hitting Ray Nitschke and running over him with basically 2 steps worth of momentum. It's unbelievable what he's doing. He was one of the fastest players in the game, and he played it between 228 and 235 pounds. And at a time when, once again, nobody's drinking, protein shakes, nobody's lifting weights. He's eating whatever the heck he feels like eating, I guess, and doing calisthenics. And you look at him physically and you're thinking, he's a time traveler. He can't be from late 1950s, early to mid 1960s. And his career ends early, not because of injury, not because he's diminishing skills, but because of all things, a fight with upper management over his shooting schedule for the Dirty Dozen, right? He had 2 or 3 more elite level years ahead of him. And once again, we're not here to speculate about what his numbers would have been. But my God, when I think about what his numbers would have been, if he played just a couple more years, Emmitt Smith is amazing, right? His toughness, his contact balance, vision are all elite. But he played just like Jim Brown, great offensive lines. But here's the big difference. Speaking of Syracuse connection, he had Daryl Johnson. And I don't think Daryl Johnson gets nearly enough recognition, love, attention, pick a term, for what he did for Emmitt Smith and what he did for the Cowboys offense as a whole. He was a terrific receiver out of the backfield, but he was one of the, in the modern definition of fullback, which is very different from, John Henry Johnson and, Larry Zonka and Jim Brown were the primary ball carriers. But in the new version of the fullback, he was sort of perfect for what the new fullback is. You catch occasional ball out of the backfield, you block, you lead your guy through the hole. He was so good at taking Emmitt to the right place. And not that Emmitt, Emmitt had good vision, don't get me wrong, but when you have Daryl Johnson, he helps you so much. If you just go where Daryl Johnson leads you, you're going to get yardage. And then you've got, like I said, that terrific offensive line. You've got Eric Williams, you've got Jesse Sapolu, you've got Nate Newton and Larry Allen, who is essentially a demigod, half man, half amazing, and whatever term you want to use. One of the great offensive lines we've ever seen. And like I said, Jim Brown had a great offensive line. Don't get me wrong. There should be at least 1 or 2 more guys probably off that Browns offensive line in the Hall of Fame, but that's a whole other discussion. But forced choice, and that's what it is. I got to go with James Nathaniel Brown.
Yeah, you make an excellent point about Moose Johnson and the impact that he had on Emmitt Smith's career. And Jim Brown did it on his own. He created his own holes.
Yep.
He blew through the line.
Yes.
And if there wasn't a hole in the line, he made one.
Yep.
And, when you lead the league in rushing yards 8 of your 9 years, that says something.
It says you're the best.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Emmitt Smith. I mean, again, we're going to have recency bias here, and you're going to have people looking at things through the fantasy football lens of, you gain more yards, that makes you a better running back. Well, no. I mean, you even compare Emmitt Smith to Walter Payton, and yeah, he broke Payton's career rushing yards. But I mean, you look at Payton. I know Payton's coming up later, so but even comparing him to Walter Payton, yeah, Walter had better career rushing yards per attempt, rushing yards per game, receiving yards or yards per reception, and receiving yards per game.
Right.
He beats him in all of those categories.
With worse surrounding talent virtually all of his career too. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, you just look at like Walter Payton's, that stutter step that he had. I mean, you just watch him and your jaw just drops when you watch someone like a Walter Payton. And I had the same thing when it came to Jim Brown. You watch him and you're just in awe at what he is able to do and what he's able to create out of almost nothing.
Right.
So no disrespect to Emmitt Smith, but I've got to go Jim Brown. And to me, Jim Brown's the greatest running back of all time, with Barry Sanders just like a hair behind him. It really comes down to, what is your favorite style of running back? Do you want the big bruiser like Jim Brown is, or do you want the elusive juking running back that you see out of Barry Sanders? You can't go wrong with either one of them. And like I said, they're 1 and 1A, and it doesn't really matter where you put them. But just to me, I have Jim Brown a hair above him as the greatest running back of all time. So he's my choice over Emmitt.
5.2 yards a carry. You know what, records will never be broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ty Cobb hitting 367 for a career. There's certain things that nobody will ever do again, right? Ever. Like you could just scratch those off. Nobody will ever break Cal Ripken's consecutive games, just start streak in base. Like certain things will never happen again. Nobody will have an entire career where they average 5.2 yards a carry. It will not happen, ever.
Yeah, another great point.
Okay, so our next two are very different because I had to put them somewhere. Dick Butkus versus George Blanda.
Again, my University of Illinois bias may come out in this one. George Blanda had a great career.
Yep.
He was able to do play quarterback. He was place kicker, excelled in both of them, had an extended career. But you've got somebody like a Dick Butkus, who, I'm not going to say he changed the game, but he was somebody that helped define the middle linebacker position. I mean, some people point to Bill George as the one who actually, did that, but I think Butkus took it to another level. And just think about that middle linebacker lineage that you had with the Bears. I mean, Bill George, Dick Butkus, Mike Singletary, and Brian Urlacher.
Not too shabby.
I mean, come on. It's just not fair.
That's why nobody talks about Joe Fortunato ever. He gets lost in the Bears sauce, but yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, to me, Dick Butkus was the prototypical middle linebacker. And he, like I said, he took it to a different level, and he instilled fear in the opponents. Anybody that's trying to run up the middle, anybody that's trying to catch a pass, you knew you're going to get your head taken off with Dick Butkus there. So I've got to go with Dick Butkus on this one.
And the most underrated part of Butkus's career, and obviously, unfortunately, due to knee injuries, he had a pretty sharp decline. But early in his career, he's shockingly good in coverage. I think that's probably the least recognized part of Butkus's game. I mean, he really was good in coverage. When, like I said, when his knees worked, he had 22 interceptions. And they weren't all gimmies. I mean, obviously some of them were, but some of them were fairly difficult interceptions. He probably had about 7 or 8 where the ball just hits him in the chest. But he earned the other 13, 14 where he had to make a tough play on the ball. And with his knees, like I said, we're good. We're working. I mean, like, allowed him to play anything close to his best. It's hard to think of a better middle linebacker. There's a short list of people I'd even put in the same breath with him. I mean, Sam Huff has to be mentioned in the same breath with him. Nobis is maybe a little bit behind. You just mentioned, Urlacher and Singletary, probably just a tier or so below. Nitschke even is probably a tier below. Ray Lewis is probably the next closest guy I can think of as a true, could do everything that a linebacker, control of the defense, sideline to sideline guy, tremendous in coverage, great against the run. But yeah, I mean, to me, that the you said 1A, 1B, that's what it is for Butkus and Lewis. It's that 1A, 1B and style, right? Do you want the more athletic guard? Do you want the, the sledgehammer? And not that Ray couldn't hit you, because Ray handed out some headaches in his career too. But Butkus had a golden horde approach to playing the position, where he wanted to pillage your village and he wanted to, slay your oxen and salt your fields so nothing would grow. There was just a level of malice that he had that, once again, if you're, below about the age of, if you're not at least in your early 50s, you can't relate probably to that level of, nobody plays that angry anymore. Nobody plays like you have Mike Curtis, who was an absolute psychopath, but I mean, but he wasn't as good a player, but he was also like clinically dangerous, probably. Thank God he found football, because he shouldn't have been roaming the streets. But that was a short list of people who played that angry, and he had the talent to go with it. So yeah, I mean, we're agreeing again. George Blanda had really two careers. He had an okay NFL career and then a great AFL career with the Oilers and Raiders. And so if you just look at his first career, he's nothing special, really. It's that second career where he becomes the George Blanda that I knew. My father, told me about the original George Blanda, who was even briefly a two-way player, if memory serves me correctly, at the very, very earliest part of his career. I think he played a little bit of linebacker, but eventually becomes a quarterback and place kicker for most of his career. And like I said, this has this great revival thanks to the AFL. He had
he had those two titles, the first two titles in league existence.
And I think he still holds one or two franchise records for the Oilers.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and check to make sure I'm not going nuts, but I think he still has like one or two game records. All the season records like that are long gone, but I think he has one or two passing game records. I have to go back and check. But he did some things that I think people would not associate with George Blanda, because they think of him. I mean, I thought he was like 60 when I first saw him. He looked every bit of his age and a little bit extra, but he looked like he should have been like like you watch a cowboy movie and he's the guy that like rides out to tell the sheriff, so-and-so's escaped from the Hooskow. Like he looked like a broken down old character actor from the cowboy movies, but he was a very effective place kicker, even, at the very end of his career. So while it's an interesting study, I mean, it's not very close, because one guy is, like I said, 1A, 1B for the best ever in his position, while the other guy's just a funny, kind of an interesting story of a guy with sort of two separate, one very great, almost great, borderline great career, and one sort of meh career earlier.
Okay. Any more on this one, or should we go to the next?
Yeah, that one was fun, but yeah, not much to. They weren't too close together in my mind.
Okay. Jerry Rice, Don Hudson.
Oh, now it gets fun. Okay.
Yeah, this one's going to be a good one too.
This is going to be good.
For me, Hudson, I mean, he dominated. Jerry Rice dominated. You can credit some of today's passing routes and stuff to Hudson, first 1,000-yard receiver. And
400 yards was considered a lot.
Yeah, and he wasn't too shabby as a defensive back either. He had 30 interceptions in his career. But I definitely have to lean toward Jerry Rice on this one. I mean, I love the old guys, and I just have to go Jerry Rice because he dominated as well. Some people, try to discredit Don Hudson, saying, well, he played during the war years and wasn't against the great talent. Well, what about when they came back? And what about before they left? He was dominant before they left. He was dominant when they came back. So to me, that's a non-starter as far as an argument is concerned. But still, I would have to go Jerry Rice. He was able to dominate more for a longer period of time. And that's why I would take him over Hudson. But again, we're talking 1 and 1A. at this point.
The thing about Jerry Rice is he had essentially 2 Hall of Fame careers. You could draw a line at about the 9-year mark and say, okay, there's 1 Hall of Fame career, and then take the rest of it and say, oh, well, there's another one. There were people who thought of themselves as highly conditioned athletes who would attempt to work out with Jerry Rice in the offseason and would quit after day 3. Terrell Owens said, I mean, look at Terrell Owens, right? You look at Terrell Owens and think, oh, this guy, looks like he knows his way around to work out. He said, I couldn't work out with Jerry Rice. Couldn't do it. Tried. Couldn't do it. His work ethic may be the single greatest in the history of the NFL. And that sounds crazy to say, but I've talked to a lot of people. I can't find anyone who says they know. No one says they can find anybody who worked harder than Jerry Rice. He was driven in such a way that no one even, like I said, no one else could even come close to what he did. And it was that work ethic. I mean, he played with some great players and some great offenses. Like, that goes without saying. Everyone we're talking about who's amongst the greatest ever. No one gets to be talking about the greatest ever playing on bad teams, and bad offenses or bad defenses. You have to be surrounded by some level of talent to be thought of as one of the greatest of all time. Because unfortunately, otherwise we sort of lost, like Archie Manning, right? Who knows what we would have been if he hadn't played with bad teams his entire career. But Jerry helped to. Joe Montana is Joe Montana because of Jerry Rice. And know who says that? Joe Montana. Joe Montana says that. Like, Joe Montana makes it clear that, oh, I had some help, and here's like number 1, Jerry Lee Rice. Like, the line starts with that, and Bill Walsh, right? He gives those both guys enormous credit for him becoming what he becomes. And then Steve Young, know what he says? Thankfully, I got to spend some time with Jerry Rice too. Jerry Rice made you right. You hear that term used a lot of times when quarterbacks talk about a receiver that they really love. When he makes you right. If you underthrow a ball, he goes and gets it. If you overthrow a ball, he goes and gets it. If you throw a quote unquote hospital ball where the defensive back is bearing down on him, he goes and gets it anyway. Jerry Rice could be every kind of receiver too. Do you need a possession receiver? Jerry Rice can be a possession receiver. 3rd and 6, sure, whatever. Do you need a deep threat? Guess what? Jerry Rice can be a deep threat. Like, there wasn't any kind of receiver Jerry Rice couldn't be. You need a downfield blocker for John Taylor or Brent Jones or whoever else? Jerry Rice is a terrific downfield blocker. There wasn't a part of his game where you said, oh, he's not good at. His football IQ was fantastic. His work ethic, like I said, maybe unmatched ever. His playing speed, his time speed wasn't anything special. 4.59 is what most of the people I've talked to said they had him timed in, hand timed, which isn't anything special, like I said. But his playing speed, I mean, we've seen him run step for step with Deion Sanders. Deion's fast, so he was as fast as he needed to be. Strong for a guy that was wiry, right? His weight was between about 190 and 202 pounds, depending on how he was working out, but strong. Like, people always marvel at with his build, how strong he was. He broke tackles, he shoved people off of him. There wasn't anything Jerry Rice could do. And the Alabama Antelope was, like, once again, a Babe Ruthian figure in that he took all the numbers that we associated with receivers and doubled them, right? So he does change the game in that sense, because suddenly people realize the passing game and wide receivers particularly, who were sort of ends, they didn't use the word ends, were sort of afterthoughts on your team, except on defense, right? They're very important on defense. They were sort of afterthoughts on offense until Don Hudson comes along and says, oh, okay, they can be superstars. They can take over games. They can win games for you. So he's super important in that way, but there's no way. I mean, Jerry Rice is once again on your football. I keep using this terrible cliche, but he has to be on your football Mount Rushmore. Don Hudson is a guy that's like so close. He's so close, but you can't. There's no one you remove, no one you can put over Jerry Rice. He might be the best football player ever. He's certainly in the discussion.
Okay, so I guess we're next. The aforementioned Joe Montana versus Dan Marino. Laces out, Marino.
Yeah, I'd say, this one is tough. Both of them had strong commands of the field.
Right.
Both of them were able to put their teams on their backs and carry them. Difference would be is that Marino couldn't carry them all the way, whereas Montana was able to do that. I mean, you're talking a 4-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time league MVP, 3-time Super Bowl MVP. To me, it's going to have to be Montana over Marino. And again, no disrespect to Marino, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but I've got to go with the guy with the rings. That's Montana.
If we didn't have to put a defense out there and keep score and have a clock and everything, you would pick Marino every time. Like if you just saw the two guys just throwing a football around, Marino beats Montana every time. And Montana would tell you that. His old joke was, I don't throw darts at balloons, I throw balloons at darts. And he was always very self-deprecating. His arm wasn't weak, but he wasn't the same sort of talented thrower of the football that Dan Marino was. Dan Marino may have had, his mechanics, the compact power of his mechanics. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody who could develop that much velocity with that little effort, right? I've seen people throw balls way harder than Dan Marino, don't get me wrong. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Favre, Elway, but none of them had that little, right? It's like watching Ali throw a jab. It seemed to only move about this far, and the ball's just gone because he had no mobility, right? The reason he wasn't sacked very much had nothing to do with his ability to move because he couldn't. But the ball just came out. You would be right there on him, and then boom, ball's gone. It was so frustrating. Like defensive players hated that about Marino. How you just know you had him. He couldn't get out of the way of anything. He was glacial, but the ball would just come out so quickly. So if you're talking about pure passing mechanics, yeah, Marino wins all day long, but we're not doing that. We're not talking about the one you want your kid to throw the football like. We're talking about the one that, as you said, 4 for 4 in Super Bowls. And while I think one of those MVPs probably should go to Jerry Lee Rice, but even if you've got 2 Super Bowl MVPs, not too shabby. But yes, he was awarded 3. And Joe will, once again, so self-deprecating, will say, yeah, Jerry and I could split it, I'll let him borrow it, that kind of thing. But he was, they called him Joe Cool for a reason. Poise, command, playing courage. I keep thinking of the old Ernest Hemingway definition, right, of classes is courage under pressure. He was just able to deliver what you needed when you needed it. And once again, another guy whose career was unfortunately altered by injury. His back really, betrayed him the last few years of his career. So we didn't see, totally what he could have been. And obviously Steve Young sort of continues the run there with the 49ers. And he has a decent into his career, sort of coda with the Kansas City Chiefs, but he's doing it, in pain. And you can, if you really watch closely, you can see he was a pretty mobile guy early in his career, but later in his career, you could just see that even any sharp movement hurts. But he still played at a fairly high level. But yeah, it's Montana. As much as I love Danny Marino. 2 Western Pennsylvania kids too.
All right, so who are we picking then?
I think we all picked Montana. Okay. Yeah, but a couple of guys from Western PA.
Okay. Well, 8 for 8. I have a feeling it's going to go 9 for 9 based on a prior conversation here. We've got 2 great running backs again, Barry Sanders and Walter Payton.
Oh.
Yeah. As I had mentioned earlier, I've got Barry as 1A behind Jim Brown. Walter Payton was absolutely special. As I had mentioned before, just watching him, your jaw would drop. Same thing with Barry Sanders. You just watch him run and you're like, does he have joints at all? Can he, how's he able to do all that? I'm in pain just watching him because my knee doesn't move like that. My ankles don't move like that. Barry was special and Walter was special. But if I had to pick one, I've got to have Barry as a slight edge over Walter. I would have Jim Brown as 1, Barry Sanders 1A, Walter Payton is 2, and that's a very close 2 to a 1A. Both were just incredible to watch, incredible abilities, but I lean toward Barry Sanders.
As Tim just alluded to, the thing that set Barry apart from every other running back I've ever seen was the ability to change direction at full speed without slowing down. And he played most of his career on turf. And you'd say to yourself, oh, this is the one. This is the cut that destroys his knee. This is the cut that, and it didn't. Each time you would just keep going. I'll never forget, and I don't want to pick on, Nesby Glasgow or anybody, but there'd be these runs where the same person would like miss him 3 times, right? I mean, he made people, I've never seen anybody make that many people miss seemingly easily. He could see, it's like he had a what they call a HUD, right? Like a fighter pilot where you have a pop-up thing that shows you everything around you. He could make people miss that were behind him. He could make, and once we talked about Deion Sanders, another thing that was ludicrous, and once again, because he was so valuable, they didn't use him much in the return game. But go back and watch him at Oklahoma State. And since we are including college as well as NFL stuff, I will never, ever, 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 ever forget the Holiday Bowl of 1988. And Barry Sanders, he's already won the Heisman Trophy. But if he hadn't, they would have had to give it to him again. Because, I mean, the voting had already happened or whatever. So he was already, but they hadn't awarded it to him yet. But the voting, he'd been named winner. I mean, he scored a touchdown receiving, rushing, and I think both on a kick and punt return. His ability to just almost like appear and disappear. I've never seen anything like it. I don't think I'll ever see anything like it again. And Walter carried basically a corpse-like Chicago Bears team for about 7 years, where they started to finally sort of become something again. And I just wish he could have spent more of his career on good teams. My last little Walter thing is I used to work for WSCR in Chicago, part-time, as a they did like live reads and whatever. And we just found out Walter was sick. And then I passed him in the hallway, and I don't know what my face said when I looked at him, but he stopped me and he shook my hand. And when he shook my hand, I almost died that day. I guess he's going to tell me, you may have heard I'm sick, but don't forget I'm Walter Payton. Walter Payton's hand strength. I've heard people talk about Adrian Peterson. I've never shaken Adrian Peterson's hands. I don't know, but I've never had anyone shake my hand like that before. And I've had some people put it on me. I literally thought my hand was going to break in 4 or 5 different places. His hand strength was insane. He's so powerful, and he wasn't a big guy. I mean, Walter entered the league at about 199 pounds and never was more than about 204 pounds, 5'10" and a half. You wouldn't know until if you were just to pass him in the streets. But if you saw him, play, you realize like his power for that size, his power to weight ratio is like something you'd find on once again like a fighter jet, right? I mean, they have that much power in that size chassis is not right, not normal. But yeah, once again, forced choice. I have to go with Barry because Barry is. We talked about it like right, Jim Brown, Barry, Walter.
And just think about, you had mentioned college, that backfield, Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas.
Not too shabby.
I think they were all right.
Yeah. Barry Switzer had this thing he said where it's like, he'd tell his guys like, I want you to hit Thurman Thomas, don't hurt him. You can hit Thurman Thomas, don't hurt him. If you hit him, they can put that kid in, they put that freshman in, and we'll have no chance. But yeah, he was, God, what a ridiculous backup. Pat Jones knew how to recruit running backs.
So not 9 in a row, that's agreed?
Yeah, we keep agreeing. I'm sorry.
No sorry needed. There's no, like I said, I was just recruiting the 2 most intelligent people on this topic. So, and I'm really happy. I couldn't have had 2 better people for this. Before I sort of promote all the stuff that I'm doing, where can everyone find the 2 of you on social media?
Ken?
You can find me at the Football Learning Academy, www.football-learning-academy.com. Also pretty active on Twitter at footballlearn1, but I'm on all the social media platforms. So yeah, just reach out to me. Love to talk football with people.
It is an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to get to be here with Ken. Ken's one of the people I really respect because, well, he knows what he's talking about, which is exciting. And he's able to impart this knowledge without making it feel like, you know, he's dunking on you, which is also nice if you can. But I have a bunch of stuff happening. My Saturday superlative series for Zinnia 62 Media is about to start up again, so that'll be dropping probably sometime tomorrow, which is just celebrating the people from the most recent Saturday and why I think they need to be, why they deserve attention. I have an article about the Jackson State, South Carolina State kickoff game that'll be dropping sometime tomorrow on Team MBS Media. And I will probably be recruiting Ken for something that I'm working on. So I keep using the term Mount Rushmore, and I do want to actually see if we can do that at each position on a football field, put together a Mount Rushmore. So I will definitely be reaching out to Ken Crippen about doing that. What else am I working on? Oh, and last but not least, I do a show each week called College Football Forecast with my very young, I'm reminded how old I am when I talk to him, but my very young co-host, the babyface assassin himself, Brock Vieira, on Team MBS's YouTube channel called College Football Forecast. We've had great guests. I've been so lucky with the guests we've had so far. And Kitten, you're a Nebraska guy? Is that
Illinois?
Oh, that's right. You said, where am I? ILL.
Yeah, there you go. I.
There we go. Yes, right. I should know that. But yes, we both have had some experience with that program. So at some point, maybe we'll do a all-time Illini team for the history of the together for. So yeah, I'll be bothering you in the future, Ken. I'm warning you ahead of time, so you may want to change all your information. But it is always an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure. Kirk, thank you so much for inviting me. I've had a blast.
Oh, no problem, no problem. If you like other things here in the Bucknerverse, because I might as well call it something. So the Bucknerverse. Ken and Bill are also voters on something that I put together. And if you want to be a part of that, and if you're watching the show, there's a good chance that you might want to be. We are looking as if the Pro Football Hall of Fame began in 1946, basically 25 years after. So every January, I put in air quotes, we're sending out ballots. So the same process: preliminary, semi, and final. It's been a lot of fun so far. We've already done 2. We're currently doing the 48 ballot. So that's something because I don't have enough to do. So I came up with that. So check that or be a part of that if you want to. We write about that on nothalloffame.com. As I think one of the other voters sort of put it together, or put it succinctly, we're doing this as if if it began in 1946 and they're not racist. Which, there's something to that. We've already seen a couple people, Fritz Pollard, who would not have gotten in.
No,
in 1947.
You are correct.
Yes,
right, no.
As it looks right now, the next class. Well, I have no idea, but I mean, one of the higher vote getters. Because I'm noticing also too, sometimes the top 5 vote getters don't translate through. I don't quite know why, but it just seems to be working that way. David Baker, I'm not, but I try. But we could have Duke Slater. That's trending now, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. We will see. But things can change. Also, in terms of the football realm, I do the Retro Football Show with Paul Lawrence, where we look at a lot of old Super Bowls and just old classic games. We've recorded 5 over the summer, and I just have to go back and do some editing, add some video. Bill, you might be interested in the next one, Super Bowl 13.
I might indeed.
Okay. I think we've picked a date for that, so I'll let you know about that. Ken, I'd love to have you on one of those too.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. Also, there's the classic sports review with Glenn Pulowski. Although we've been really moving away from a lot of sports, we did roller games, if you ever heard of that, from 1991. So that was recorded this summer. The 1994 Major League Baseball All-Star Game right before the strike. So we thought that would be sort of interesting. And Wednesday, we're going to be recording the 1987 Canada Cup game between Canada and the Soviet Union. So that's lots of Hall of Famers. Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux on the same line. And also, then there's the show I do with Vinny LaSpanusa, where Vinny makes the Hall of Fame case for various people. Sometimes I've even heard of them. But it's always a lot of fun, and I always learn a lot from, I guess, my other young co-host.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's
so
nothing good at having a super young co-host because it puts everything in perspective.
51 this week. I don't know how that happened, but there we go. I guess it's better than the alternative, which is
It beats the living daylights out of the alternative, Kirk.
Literally.
Yes, literally.
And there's also another show I do just for fun, which is called How the Hell Was This a Hit? Where we look at really bad songs and ask, how was this a hit? The last one we recorded was Una Paloma Blanca.
Ah, yes. Una Paloma Blanca. Yes.
I got inspired to select because that was featured in the Super Bowl 11 halftime show.
Yes. Because nothing says football like the song Una Paloma Blanca.
But it's the Mouseketeer. It was so weird. I don't know what was worse, that or Up With People.
Yes, I'll never forget that selection as well. Like that. Like I remember when they had like marching bands. I think Grambling's marching band might have even been one of the early Super Bowls. Like
They were,
yeah. Okay, I could see that. But yeah, like some of the choices have been very strange ones, yes.
Yeah, so one that it was, I couldn't find the actual thing because I love ripping on that stuff, but it was Carol Channing.
Yes. Like, once again, nothing says rock'em sock'em hardy actually like Carol Channing. You know?
What are those stars of the 60s and 70s? I just don't get. But nevertheless, that's how it is. So again,
I was associated with Hollywood Squares. That's what always pops in my head when I think of Carol Channing.
Is she on that? I don't. I just remember Paul Lynde.
If she wasn't, she should have been.
Yeah. So, and again, if you've watched this, please go and vote, www.nothinghalloffame.com/USA. Perhaps Ken and Bill have inspired you to make some votes or in a certain way, or they didn't do anything to convince you at all. But I'm hoping that they convinced you to go on the site and do vote. It's not just football. There's 130 candidates. There's also a coaches section and a contributor section. So we're covering 11 different sports. I'm sure hopefully I can do them off the top of my head. Football, baseball, basketball, auto racing, tennis, swimming, mixed martial arts, boxing, basketball. Did I say that already?
How about track and field?
Track and field, and Willie Mosconi. So we got someone in pool, diving, Greg Louganis. So I think I'm going to get the same thing for baseball. I don't know how that might work for basketball. I don't know that I've got a lot of basketball gurus who are sort of following me, but
okay,
maybe there are, and I'm just not aware. Okay. So with that, wherever you are, wherever you may be, stay safe, everybody.